All right, so today we're diving deep into hybrid cooking classes. At first I was a little skeptical. Can you really capture that hands-on, in-person magic,
Yeah.
online?
Yeah, I get that.
But honestly, the more I dug into this, the more I realized this isn't just some passing trend. This is like a whole new way to learn and teach. And the success stories are seriously inspiring.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is how hybrid classes are actually addressing a need for both sides,
Mhm.
both the teachers and the students. Like, think about it, traditional cooking schools. They've got limitations, high overhead fixed schedules, location restrictions. And for students, life gets in the way all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
But with this blended approach, everybody wins.
Okay, so we know hybrid is booming, but why? Everyone talks about flexibility and convenience, but is there something deeper going on here?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that really stood out to me from the research was this idea of experiential learning. Like, people aren't just looking for information anymore, they want immersion. They
Right.
want to feel like they're part of something.
That makes total sense. Like watching a YouTube video is one thing, but actually interacting with a chef, asking questions live, that's a whole other level.
Exactly. And that's where the hybrid model really shines. You get the best of both worlds. The intimacy of a small group setting, but also the reach and accessibility of online learning.
I love that. Best of both worlds.
It's like having your cake and eating it too, but the cake is like a perfectly seared steak with a side of gourmet potatoes.
Okay, now I'm officially hungry. But seriously, you mentioned success stories earlier. Can we dive into one? I'm all about learning from the best.
Yeah, for sure. There's this chef in Austin, Texas, who was running a traditional brick-and-mortar cooking school. But she saw the writing on the wall. People were craving that flexibility, so she took a leap of faith and went hybrid.
And what happened? Did it work?
It was a complete game changer. Her student base, like, tripled within a year, and she was able to tap into this global audience she could have only dreamed of before.
Wow, that's incredible. What did she do differently? What were her secrets?
Well, one key factor was her focus on niche cooking classes.
Mm.
So instead of just offering the usual Italian or French cuisine, she zeroed in on specialized dietary needs.
Yeah.
Vegan, gluten-free, paleo, you name it.
Oh, that's smart. She identified a gap in the market and filled it with this hybrid model.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
And she didn't skimp on the technology either. She invested in a professional-grade camera setup with multiple angles, so online students felt like they're right there in the kitchen with her.
Wait, multiple cameras? That sounds complicated.
It takes some planning, but it's worth it for the enhanced viewer experience.
Yeah.
She uses a main camera for a wide shot of the kitchen, and then a second camera focused just on her hands for close-ups of chopping, mixing all the techniques.
Oh, I see. It's like those cooking shows where you can see every little detail. So besides the niche classes and the fancy camera setup, what else contributed to her success?
Another crucial factor was community building. She created a private Facebook group just for her students, where they could share their creations, ask questions, connect with each other. It became this vibrant online hub where people felt supported and encouraged.
That's such a cool idea. So it's not just about the cooking itself, it's about fostering that sense of connection, right?
Exactly. And that's something that really sets these hybrid classes apart from those pre-recorded YouTube tutorials. You're not just passively watching, you're actively engaging, learning, and growing together.
All right, so we've got the inspiration now. Let's get practical. What does it actually take to set up a hybrid cooking class, both for the in-person and the online components?
Yeah, it really is like running two productions simultaneously. For the in-person side, a well-equipped kitchen is obviously a must. But for the online experience, that's where it gets really interesting. You can't just prop up your phone and hope for the best.
So what kind of tech are we talking about?
Well, high-quality cameras for starters. You don't need a Hollywood budget, but a decent DSLR or mirrorless camera will make a huge difference. And don't underestimate good audio.
Oh, yeah. Nobody wants to listen to muffled sounds and crackling microphones. What kind of mic would you recommend?
A lavalier microphone is a great option, the kind that clips onto your clothing. It keeps your hands free and ensures clear audio pickup.
Good tip. Now, you mentioned lighting earlier, and I have to admit, I'm guilty of filming some pretty dark and grainy videos in my kitchen. What's the secret to good lighting?
You'd be surprised how much difference a simple ring light can make. It gives you that soft, even illumination that makes everything look more professional. And you can find them online for a reasonable price.
Okay, so cameras, microphones, lighting. Anything else we need for the online setup?
Ah, the unsung hero of live streaming. A stable internet connection. You'll need a reliable internet plan with enough bandwidth to handle that video streaming without any buffering or dropouts.
So true. Definitely learned that one the hard way. Now, what about software? What do we need to actually stream the classes?
There are a bunch of platforms out there, but some popular ones are Zoom OBS Studio and Restream. They allow you to broadcast live, share your screen, and interact with your online audience.
Okay, that's a good starting point. Now let's talk about the in-person setup. You mentioned a well-equipped kitchen, but what does that actually mean?
Think about the essentials: spacious countertop, a reliable stovetop or oven, a variety of pots and pans, sharp knives, and a good set of measuring tools. And don't forget about safety equipment like fire extinguishers and first aid kits.
Right, safety first. And what about space for students? How many people can you comfortably accommodate in a hybrid class?
Now, that depends on the size of your kitchen, of course. But a good rule of thumb is to keep the in-person group small and intimate, maybe around 6 to 8 students. This allows for more personalized attention and more hands-on experience.
Okay, so we've got the tech and the physical setup sorted, but what about the content of the class itself? How do you structure a hybrid cooking class to make it engaging and effective for both in-person and online students?
That's where the real magic happens. But you know what? It's almost time for our first break, and I think this is the perfect spot to pause. When we come back, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty, of course, structure lesson planning, and how to make your hybrid cooking class a truly unforgettable experience for everyone involved.
Sounds good. Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle the most important ingredient in this whole hybrid cooking class recipe, the content itself. How do you design a class that's both informative and engaging, whether you're right there in the kitchen or joining virtually?
That's a question I get asked a lot, and honestly, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It really depends on your teaching style, the cuisine you're focusing on, and the skill level of your students. But there are some key principles that apply across the board.
All right, lay 'em on me.
First things first, you need a clear learning objective. What specific skills or knowledge do you want your students to walk away with? Once you have that nailed down, you can start building your curriculum around it.
So it's kind of like reverse engineering a recipe. You start with the desired outcome and then work backwards to figure out the steps involved.
Exactly. And just like a good recipe, a well-structured cooking class needs a clear flow. You want to start with the basic like knife skills or essential cooking techniques, and then gradually build up to more complex dishes.
Makes sense. And how do you keep things engaging for both the in-person and online audience? I imagine it's a bit of a juggling act, keeping everyone involved.
It definitely is. That's why it's so important to incorporate interactive elements throughout the class. For the in-person folks, that might mean hands-on activities, taste tests, or even friendly competitions.
Ooh, I love the competition idea. Like, who can chop an onion the fastest or create the most creative garnish? That would be so fun.
Exactly. A little healthy competition can really spice things up. And for the online audience, you can use tools like live polls, Q&A sessions, and even virtual breakout rooms where they can connect with each other and share their thoughts.
You know what really impressed me in our research was this idea of pre-class prep. Some of these hybrid instructors are sending out ingredient lists and equipment checklists in advance, so everyone's ready to go when the class starts.
That's such a smart move. It not only ensures a smoother experience for everyone, but it also shows your students that you're organized and that you value their time. And speaking of valuing their time, you need to be mindful of pacing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You don't want to cram too much information into one session. It's better to go a little slower and make sure everyone's understanding the concepts.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that sweet spot between keeping things moving and allowing for digestion, both literally and figuratively. And don't be afraid to incorporate some visual aids.
Visual aids, like what?
Think diagrams, charts,
Yeah.
close-up shots of techniques, even pre-recorded video clips that demonstrate specific skills. This can be especially helpful for online students who might not have the same visual cues as the in-person group.
Great point. Visuals can really enhance the learning experience. Now, we've talked a lot about the teaching aspect, but what about the learning? How do you make sure your students are actually absorbing all this culinary knowledge?
Assessment is key. Now, I don't mean formal tests or anything like that, but you can incorporate informal quizzes, polls, or even just open-ended questions throughout the class to gauge understanding.
And I bet those Q&A sessions are invaluable for both you and the students, right? It's a chance to clear up any confusion, answer specific questions, and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely. It's like having a personalized feedback loop built right into the class. And don't underestimate the power of post-class support.
What do you mean by that? Like sharing recipes and stuff?
Yes, definitely share those recipes. But you can go a step further by creating a dedicated online forum or community where students can continue to connect, ask questions, and share their creations.
Oh, I love that. It's like extending the classroom experience beyond the actual class itself. It's a great way to keep that momentum going and foster a sense of community. Okay, so we've covered course structure, content engagement, and even post-class support. But let's be real. One of the biggest challenges for any online educator is standing out from the crowd. I mean, there are tons of free cooking videos and recipes available on YouTube. How do you convince people that investing in your hybrid classes is worth it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something that I struggled with myself when I first started out. But what I've learned is it's all about showcasing your unique value proposition.
So what makes you different? What can you offer that those free YouTube videos can't?
Well, for starters, it's the personalized feedback and real-time interaction. When you're watching a pre-recorded video, you're just passively consuming information. But in a hybrid class, you have the opportunity to ask questions, get specific advice, and even have your technique critiqued by an expert.
That's such a good point. It's like the difference between reading a cookbook and having a personal chef guide you through each step.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the community aspect. Learning alongside other passionate cooks, sharing tips and tricks, and getting inspired by each other's creations, that's something you just can't replicate with a solo YouTube session.
You know, it's like those cooking competition shows where the contestants become this tight-knit family, even though they're competing against each other. There's something magical about that shared experience.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the power of community in a learning environment. It's not just about acquiring skills, it's about connecting with others who share your passion.
Okay, so personalized feedback, community building, and a structured learning experience. Those are all great selling points. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, pricing. How do you determine the right price point for your hybrid cooking classes, especially in a world where free content is so readily available?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And it's something that every entrepreneur wrestles with. You don't want to undervalue your expertise, but you also want to make your classes accessible to a wide audience.
Right. It's all about finding that balance between value and affordability. So, what are some factors to consider when setting your prices?
Well, first and foremost, you need to factor in your costs. Think about the ingredients, equipment, marketing expenses, and of course, your own time and expertise.
Yeah, you got to pay the bills.
Exactly. But beyond the basic costs, you also want to consider the perceived value of your classes. What unique benefits are you offering? What are your students willing to pay for?
And I imagine the format of the class plays a role too, right? Like a basic online-only class might be priced differently than a premium hybrid experience with both in-person and virtual components.
Absolutely. You might offer different tiers of pricing with varying levels of access and benefits. For example, a basic online package might include live streaming recipes and access to a community forum, while a premium hybrid package might also include in-person instruction, hands-on activities, and personalized feedback.
That makes sense. It's like choosing your level of adventure from a casual day trip to a full-blown expedition.
And don't be afraid to experiment with different pricing models. You might offer single-class options, multi-class packages, or even subscription-based memberships. It's all about finding what works best for your business and your target audience.
So lots to consider when it comes to pricing. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about marketing. You could have the most amazing hybrid cooking classes in the world, but if no one knows about them, it's like that tree falling in the forest. So how do you get the word out?
Marketing. The lifeblood of any business, especially in the digital age. And luckily for us, there are so many tools and platforms at our disposal.
Okay, so where do we start? What are the must-haves for a hybrid cooking class marketing strategy?
Well, the foundation of any good marketing plan is a strong online presence. That means having a professional-looking website that showcases your brand, your classes, and your unique selling points.
And I bet SEO is crucial too, right? You want people to be able to find you when they're searching for online cooking classes.
SEO is absolutely essential. Think of it like this: SEO is like the spices in your recipe. The right ones will attract exactly the right audience to your culinary creations.
I love that analogy. So what are some SEO tips specifically for hybrid cooking classes?
Well, you want to make sure your website is using relevant keywords that potential students might be searching for. Things like best online cooking classes, live cooking workshops, or even specific cuisines like vegan online cooking classes or French pastry online course.
Got it. So it's all about anticipating what people are typing into those search bars and making sure your website shows up in the results. Now, what about social media? I feel like that's a must-have for any business these days, but how do you use it effectively to promote cooking classes?
Social media is such a powerful tool, but it can also be overwhelming. The key is to be strategic and focus on the platforms where your target audience hangs out.
Okay, so where should we be focusing our efforts?
Well, for visual content like food photos and cooking videos, Instagram and TikTok are no-brainers. You can share behind-the-scenes snippets, mouth-watering dishes, even quick tutorials that give people a taste of your teaching style.
And I bet those short attention-grabbing videos are perfect for platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels, right?
Exactly. People love to scroll through those quick, engaging videos. And don't underestimate the power of a good story. Share your culinary journey, your inspirations, and the stories behind your dishes. People connect with authenticity, and it makes your brand more relatable.
Okay, so Instagram and TikTok for visuals and storytelling. What about platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn? Are those relevant for a cooking class business?
Absolutely. Facebook is great for community building. You can create a group or page where you share recipes, tips, and connect with your students. It's a more informal setting where you can foster a sense of community and keep people engaged between classes.
Oh, I like that. It's like an online extension of your kitchen where people can gather and chat about all things food. And what about LinkedIn? I don't usually think of that platform for something like cooking, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
LinkedIn can be surprisingly effective for promoting a cooking class business, especially if you're targeting corporate clients or professionals who might be interested in team-building activities or culinary workshops.
Oh, that's a smart angle. It's all about finding those niche audiences and tailoring your message accordingly. Now, I have to ask about YouTube. It's the go-to platform for all things video, including cooking tutorials. But how do you leverage that massive audience without giving away all your secret recipes for free?
That's a great question. You don't want to cannibalize your paid classes with free content, but you also want to take advantage of YouTube's reach. The key is to create a strategic mix of content.
Okay, so what does that look like?
You might offer short teaser-style videos that highlight your expertise and pique people's interest, but you don't give away the entire recipe or technique. It's like a trailer for your full-length cooking class.
Oh, I like that. It's like giving them a little taste to entice them to come back for the full meal.
Exactly. And you can also use YouTube to build your brand authority and establish yourself as a credible source of culinary knowledge.
Yeah.
Share tips, tricks, and behind-the-scenes glimpses that showcase your passion and personality.
Okay, so website, SEO, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. That's a lot to juggle. Any other marketing tips for aspiring hybrid cooking class entrepreneurs?
Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Collaborate with other food bloggers, chefs, or even local businesses. Host pop-up events or cooking demonstrations. Get creative and find ways to get your name and your brand out there.
That's great advice. It's all about being resourceful and finding creative ways to stand out from the crowd. Now let's talk about the financial side of things. I know it's not everyone's favorite topic, but it's kind of important if you're trying to make a living from this. So what's the earning potential for a hybrid cooking class business?
Well, just like any business, the earning potential can vary widely depending on factors like your pricing strategy, the number of students you attract, and your ability to diversify your income streams.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. First, pricing. We talked earlier about different pricing models, but what's a realistic range for a single hybrid cooking class?
Well, it really depends on the length and complexity of the class, the ingredients involved, and your location. But a reasonable starting point might be somewhere between $30 and $75 per class.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, of course, the number of students you have in each class will impact your revenue, but how do you actually get those students in the first place?
That's where all that marketing we talked about earlier comes into play. Building a strong online presence, creating engaging content, and getting your name out there are all essential for attracting students.
Right, it's all about creating that buzz and generating excitement around your classes. And then once you have those students, how do you keep them coming back for more?
That's where the magic of customer experience comes in. It's all about creating a welcoming, supportive, and inspiring learning environment where students feel valued and empowered.
Okay, so happy students are returning students. But beyond just teaching recipes, how do you create that exceptional customer experience?
Well, communication is key. Be responsive to inquiries, answer questions thoroughly, and keep your students informed about upcoming classes and events.
Right, make them feel like they're part of a community, not just a transaction.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of personalization. Address your students by name, remember their preferences, and try to tailor your instruction to their individual needs.
It's those little touches that make a big difference.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to go the extra mile. Offer bonus resources, exclusive recipes, or even behind-the-scenes glimpses into your culinary world. Make your students feel like VIPs, and they'll be more likely to become loyal fans and spread the word about your classes.
Okay, so customer experience is all about communication, personalization, and going above and beyond. Now let's talk about diversifying income streams. You mentioned that earlier, but I'd love to dig a little deeper. What are some ways to generate revenue beyond those single class fees?
That's a great question, and it's something that's crucial for building a sustainable business. One option is to offer multi-class packages or subscription-based memberships.
So instead of just paying for one class at a time, students could commit to a series of classes or even get unlimited access to your online content for a monthly fee.
Exactly. This not only provides a more predictable income stream for you, but it also encourages students to engage more deeply with your content and become part of your culinary community.
That's a win-win. Any other revenue generating ideas?
Well, you could also explore corporate partnerships, offering team-building cooking classes or culinary workshops for businesses.
Oh, that's a great idea. And it taps into a whole new market. What else?
Get creative with merchandise. You could sell branded aprons, cooking utensils, or even your own signature spice blends.
Ooh, I love that. It's a fun way to extend your brand and offer something tangible for your students to take home. Okay, so we've covered pricing, marketing, customer experience, and diversifying income streams. I think we've pretty much cooked up a recipe for success here. But before we wrap up, I want to address one more thing that I know is on a lot of people's minds, technology. We talked earlier about the technical setup for hybrid classes, but what about the challenges of actually teaching in this dual format? How do you manage both in-person and online students simultaneously?
That's a valid concern, and it's definitely something that takes practice and finesse. One of the biggest challenges is maintaining engagement with both groups.
Right. You don't want your online students feeling like they're just watching a passive video, and you don't want your in-person students feeling neglected either.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance. One tip is to make eye contact with both groups regularly, even if it means looking directly at the camera when you're addressing your online audience.
Oh, that's a good reminder. It's easy to get so focused on the people right in front of you that you forget about the virtual audience.
And don't be afraid to ask your online students specific questions, just like you would with your in-person group. This helps them feel seen and heard and encourages active participation.
And what about those hands-on activities we talked about earlier? How do you incorporate those when you have both groups to manage?
Well, you might demonstrate the activity for both groups and then have your in-person students follow along while your online students watch and take notes.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's all about being mindful of both audiences and finding creative ways to adapt the activities. Any other tips for managing the dual format?
Well, one thing that can be helpful is to have an assistant or moderator who can help monitor the online chat, answer questions, and troubleshoot any technical issues.
Well, that's a great idea. It takes some of the pressure off you and allows you to focus on teaching. Any other words of wisdom for aspiring hybrid cooking instructors out there?
Don't be afraid to experiment and find what works best for you and your students. There's no right or wrong way to teach a hybrid class, so embrace the flexibility and have fun with it.
That's great advice. And I think it applies to any entrepreneurial endeavor, really. Be willing to adapt, learn, and grow along the way.
Okay, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about hybrid cooking classes, from setting up your kitchen to marketing your brand to creating an unforgettable student experience. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question.
One of the most exciting things about the hybrid model is its potential for scalability. You're not limited by physical space or location, so you can reach a global audience and grow your business exponentially. But with that growth comes the responsibility of maintaining quality and authenticity. So my question for you is, how do you scale a hybrid business without sacrificing the personal touch that makes it so special? That's such a great question. It's like that age-old dilemma. How do you grow without losing the heart and soul of what made you successful in the first place?
Exactly, and I think it's something that every entrepreneur grapples with at some point in their journey.
Yeah.
In the world of hybrid cooking classes, it's about finding that sweet spot where technology enhances the human connection rather than replacing it.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? How do you maintain that personal touch when you're teaching hundreds or even thousands of students online?
Well, one strategy is to leverage technology to create smaller, more intimate learning communities within your larger student base.
So even though you might have a massive global audience, you're dividing them into smaller groups where they can still connect with each other and with you on a more personal level.
Exactly. You could create private Facebook groups, online forums, or even use platforms like Slack or Discord to foster those smaller communities.
Mm.
And don't underestimate the power of automation.
Automation. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
How does that fit into the picture?
Well, think about all those repetitive tasks that eat up your time, like sending welcome emails, answering frequently asked questions, or even grading quizzes. You can automate a lot of those processes using tools like email marketing platforms or learning management systems.
Oh, that's smart. It frees up your time so you can focus on the things that really matter, like creating amazing content and connecting with your students.
Exactly. And speaking of content, you can also use technology to personalize the learning experience.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
Well, imagine using quizzes or surveys to assess your students' skill levels and preferences, and then using that data to recommend specific courses or recipes that are tailored to their individual needs.
That's so cool. It's like having a virtual culinary concierge who guides them through the world of cooking based on their unique tastes and goals.
And you can also use technology to gather feedback from your students and constantly improve your offerings.
Feedback is so crucial. It's how you learn and grow. But how do you actually gather feedback effectively in a hybrid environment?
Well, you can use online surveys polls, or even just encourage open-ended feedback in your community forums. And don't be afraid to ask for testimonials from your happy students. Those real-life stories are powerful marketing tools.
So true. People trust recommendations from other people, especially when it comes to something like cooking. Okay, so we've talked about leveraging technology to create smaller communities, automate tasks, personalize the learning experience, and gather feedback. Any other tips for scaling a hybrid business without losing that personal touch?
I think the most important thing is to never lose sight of your why. Why did you start taking cooking classes in the first place? What are you passionate about? What do you want your students to experience?
It's so easy to get caught up in the logistics and the technology and the marketing that we forget about the heart of it all.
Exactly. So always come back to your core values and let them guide your decisions as you grow. And never underestimate the power of a simple thank you.
Oh, that's such a good point. Showing gratitude to your students goes a long way in building those relationships and fostering that sense of community.
And it brings us back to that idea of human connection that we talked about earlier. At the end of the day, people crave connection, whether they're learning in person or online. And it's that connection that will ultimately make your hybrid cooking class business thrive.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from the nitty-gritty of setting up a hybrid class to the big picture strategies for scaling your business. And as someone who loves to learn new things, I'm feeling super inspired by all the possibilities.
And that's what I love about the deep dive. It's not just about acquiring information. It's about sparking those aha moments and empowering you to take action. So whether you're a seasoned chef or just starting your culinary journey, I hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and a fresh perspective on the world of hybrid cooking classes.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this episode, I'm reminded of that quote by Julia Child. Find something you're passionate about and keep tremendously interested in it. And I think that's the perfect note to end on.
Couldn't agree more. So go forth. Explore your culinary passions and see what delicious creations you can cook up in your own corner of the world. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.